Hello, I'm Congressman Ted Lieu, and welcome to this Facebook Live Town Hall. I am in my Washington, D.C. office, and with amazing technology, I am able to have Senator Ben Allen and Senator Al Murasucci from California join at the same time. And we're going to talk about the bipartisan infrastructure law. But before that, I do want to highlight a little bit about the pandemic. Some of you may have seen that the FDA has recently approved booster shots for 16 and 17-year-olds. A recent study came out showing that if you get a third shot of the Pfizer vaccine, for example, you're going to be protected at about the same rate against Omicron as if you had two shots against original COVID. So that's pretty good protection. And if you have not yet been vaccinated, please talk to your doctor about the benefits of vaccines, or if you don't have a doctor, please read what the American Medical Association or other doctors' organizations have said about vaccines. And with that, happy to talk about the bipartisan infrastructure law and what is in it. It is going to help rebuild America's roads, bridges, and highways, as well as make sure that we have broadband everywhere from rural areas to inner cities. It's also going to help take lead out of our water, and it's going to make sure we have environmental projects such as EV charging stations. And we're going to have Senator Ben Allen give his thoughts, and then Senator Al Murasucci, and then I will ask them some questions. And please also feel free on Facebook if you want to put in your questions. My staff is monitoring as well. So Senator Allen, as some of you may know, he is chair of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee. He also sits on the Transportation Committee. And the first question to him is also going to be a first question to Senator Al Murasucci, which is, what excites you most about this infrastructure law?
Well, thank you so much, Congressman. Really appreciate having you. Appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the leadership of the folks in the House who really helped to make this happen. With the great partnership with President Biden. There's a lot to be excited about. I'm particularly excited about the money that's going to come help to improve our highways, our bridges, and of course our public transportation system, and the expansion of an electric vehicle charging network in the state, and the ability for us to apply for a lot more money in grant funding. I think it's about $2.5 billion in grant funding dedicated to EV charging. So, serving on the Transportation Committee, we're constantly dealing with questions of how to improve our road infrastructure, how to improve public transit, but also how to build out the EV system. And there's just going to be a lot of money that we're hoping to access in cooperation, your partnership with your office and Senators Feinstein and Padilla, to make sure that our region is getting some really good resources to help improve our transportation system here locally.
Well, thank you, Senator Allen. And to you, Senator Murasucci, what excites you most about the infrastructure law?
Well, thank you, Congressman, for inviting us to join you. And, I'm proud to represent the South Bay together with you, Congressman, and Senator Allen. And so I think, all of our interests, all of our priorities are aligned. I mean, we are so excited about this historic, biggest investment in infrastructure in nearly a century. And, not only are we talking about, extending projects like the LA Metro to Torrance so that we can get more people onto rail and out of our cars, not only to cut down on traffic, but to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. We know, and I know as chair of the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change, that over 40% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California comes from our cars and our trucks. And so, we, in order to fight climate change, we're seeing already the worst effects of climate change in our state. We need to get, people out of their polluting cars and trucks, and especially getting them into the electric vehicles. And so the infrastructure bill that's going to provide billions of dollars to, ramp up the national electric vehicle charging network. That is so huge. Last but not least, I'm really excited about all the investment in broadband. I mean, broadband is, I like to call broadband as the infrastructure of the 21st century. Broadband are the freeways and the roads of the 21st century, and we so desperately need to close the digital divide that we saw so apparent during this pandemic, where especially low-income communities in urban areas, as well as all rural communities, we're cut off. I mean, in a lot of ways, broadband is the civil rights issue of the 21st century, in that if people don't have access to affordable, reliable internet, they can't get to their workplace if they're working remotely. They can't get into the classroom if they're engaged in distance learning. And so this investment in broadband is, it's a bipartisan investment in the infrastructure that's going to make our nation more competitive. And so I'm so excited about your efforts in Washington.
Thank you, Al. And I note that Assemblymember Murasucci is also chair of the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change Policies, and he also sits on the Utilities and Energy Committees, as well as other committees. And I'm glad, Assemblymember Murasucci, that you did mention broadband. And we have to look at infrastructure as infrastructure for the 21st century. Something I fought for is to make sure we do have broadband everywhere. I do want to note that in terms of the amount of funding we're going to get, I'm going to tell you in terms of all the funding for California, $9.45 billion over 5 years to improve public transportation, $4.2 billion for bridge replacement and repairs, and then $25.3 billion for federal highway replacement and repairs, as well as $84 million over 5 years to protect against wildfires, and $40 million to protect against cyber attacks, as well as $3.5 billion over 5 years to improve water infrastructure. So this is a lot of money coming into California. And as some of you may know, the Olympics are coming. We're going to have the Olympics in Los Angeles County in 2028. And Senator Allen wanted to get your thoughts on how this might help with the Olympics that we're going to see sooner rather than later. Are you muted?
Yeah, okay, unmuted, there we are. Speaking of technological needs, so the Olympics, of course, are going to involve it's a massive undertaking. It's going to involve moving around a lot of people. It's also going to involve having the sort of state-of-the-art technological broadband service for our region. So certainly the $100 million for broadband coverage across the state that Al mentions is going to be really important. Improving the public transportation system, the public transportation infrastructure, it's a really important part of the infrastructure bill. $9.45 billion for public transportation around the state of California. And then, of course, as you mentioned, $25 billion for federal aid highway apportionment programs. All of that's going to really help move people around. And then, of course, the EV charging infrastructure. We're hoping this is going to be the greenest Olympics ever. So people will be able to get around using lower and zero emission vehicles. And that's going to also help to be effectuated because of all this EV charging infrastructure. We also, there's a lot of money going into improving our water infrastructure. We want to make sure people are going to be, accessing clean water as they visit and compete in the Olympics. There's going to be money for infrastructure developments for our airports. I think it's $1.5 billion over the next 5 years for the state, specific to our airports. So really improving the capacity at LAX, in Ontario, at Burbank airports, Long Beach airports as well, so people can be coming in and out in a more efficient manner. But then hopefully taking public transportation from the airport to their hotels, to those sites that are going to host the Olympics. It's going to be an immensely exciting Olympics. I've already gotten a chance to learn a little about some of the plans that are evolving. A number of places in our district are going to be sites for the Olympics. And all of this infrastructure support, particularly in the transportation space, is going to help make it so much more smooth.
In fact, I believe one of their Olympic villages is going to be right at UCLA.
UCLA, that's going to be the site of that's going to be where the athletes are going to be, and so being able to get them in and out of UCLA easily as they get to the sites is obviously one of the many things that's going to be benefited by this infrastructure package.
Senator Murasucci, I note that you sit on the Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee. I sat on that committee as well when I was in the Assembly, and it's very clear, as you know, water is complicated. and we're perpetually facing droughts. I have two questions for you. Are we facing another drought in California? And how does some of this infrastructure money help in us to deal with the possibility of an upcoming drought?
Yes, Congressman, as you know, a popular saying in California, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And, California's been facing one of the worst droughts in almost a century. And so we so desperately need to build up our water infrastructure so that we can continue to provide for the basic needs for clean drinking water for all, in our state that is, not only 40 million strong in terms of population, but, the world's fifth largest economy. I just had a chance to visit a very exciting new project yesterday, right next door to us in the South Bay, in the city of Carson. The Metropolitan Water District and the Los Angeles County Sanitation District are building the country's biggest water recycling plant. That's going to provide the infrastructure for Southern Californians to get their water from recycled water, so that we can have locally sourced, locally sustainable water, that we won't have to rely, as we currently do, on water that we're bringing in from such far locations as from Northern California, from the Sierras, and from the Colorado River. As the effects of climate change continue to be seen in California in terms of the effects of the drought, we so desperately need to build this water recycling, stormwater capture and other water infrastructure, so that we can continue to not only to deal with the new realities of climate change, but to make sure that we continue to provide clean drinking water for all. So again, this infrastructure bill is huge. It's a bipartisan deal that's going to invest in our most basic needs, like clean water.
Thank you. Now, I do want to just make the point that certainly in the South Bay, we have clean tap water, and people should not be afraid to drink that. Would you say that's correct? Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. Yesterday, I had a sample of some of the treated water, and it's amazing the technology they have using reverse osmosis, ultraviolet rays, and so many other cutting edge technology to make sure that all of our water supply is clean. It's taking out the lead. I know that's also a big part of this bill, is to ensure that we have lead-free water for all, because we know that has historically been a big challenge, especially in many of our low-income communities.
Thank you. Now, Senator Allen, I know that both you and Senator Marisucci have been longtime environmental champions. There is funding in this infrastructure law, not only for environmental projects that reduce greenhouse gases, but also for adaptation, to make sure that we're more resilient to climate change. How important is it, do you think, that we also start focusing on adaptation now?
Yeah, it's interesting, Congressman. Thank you for bringing that up. A lot of people, of course, a lot of our focus has been on trying to do whatever we can to make it so that we're not contributing as much to the changing climate and to climate change. But as you say, whether we like it or not, some form of climate change is a reality. And we have to figure out ways to make sure that we're more resilient, that we're actually going to be well adapted to some of the impacts of climate change. So actually had introduced a climate resiliency bond a couple of years ago that would have allocated $5.5 billion to fund green jobs that prepare us for extreme weather and other climate related events. Much of the bond was ultimately incorporated into this year's budget. We obviously had some more resources. And now the infrastructure package that you guys were able to pass, sign into law, it's doubled down on that investment. So we're now, it's really going to help us prepare for the impacts of climate change, even while we strive to minimize them. So extreme wildfires made worse by climate change have ravaged our state the past several years. But we know that, for every dollar that we invest in preventing fires, we actually save $6 in the cost of both fight and clean up a blaze. We'll now be able to fund projects to reduce fire risk and restore already damaged areas, restore and protect impacted wetlands, watersheds, waterways, coastal resources, fish and wildlife populations. we're going to be able to put some resources toward reducing climate impacts, such as the urban heat island effect on local communities that end up increasing temperatures in urban areas quite a bit higher than in rural areas. We're also looking to help use some of the resources to improve the resiliency of the state's water supplies and agricultural lands. We know we have enormous water challenges, as you just discussed. So this is all going to help us reduce the impacts of rising global temperatures and also help us invest in necessary preventative measures to protect vulnerable communities and all of our communities and our natural resources, including our water supply. So I'm excited about having some additional resource to help us better weather the impacts of climate change.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Murasucci, I know you're also on the Natural Resources Committee, and just want to see what was your view of the importance of adaptation when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, we like to say that California is on the front line of the climate crisis, the global climate crisis, and we see it in so many ways. We've been talking about it in so many ways. We've had some of the world's worst wildfires. I mean, the worst wildfires in California's history have all been in the last 10 years. Those are clearly not just affecting the communities that have suffered directly from those wildfires, but as we saw, those images of the orange smoke-filled skies throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, even here in the Los Angeles area, where we get all the smoke, not just in the wildfire areas, but in the suburban communities, many of which all three of us represent. I mean, those air pollution impacts, the particulate pollution that deeply embeds in the lungs of our kids. This, the climate crisis is real and it's here, and it's affecting all of us. So the fact that the federal government, I know, Congressman, you've talked about this a lot, especially when President Trump was talking about how we just need to fight wildfires by just raking leaves. The vast majority of wildfire country in the state of California, as you know, is on federal lands. And so if we can get more of those federal lands to engage in the forest management and the prescribed burns, to cut down and to be able to control, these ever escalating wildfires in the state of California, again, is going to be huge for all of our communities.
Thank you. I'm going to ask both of you one more question on infrastructure, and then I am going to ask each of you a question on the pandemic to give you a chance to talk about it from the state level. The question on the last question on infrastructure is, it is my understanding that due to your good work, as well as that of Governor Newsom, we're going to have another budget surplus in California. What's your sense of how we can leverage that along with this federal infrastructure law and really transform LA County in the South Bay?
Well, I would just start by saying the combination of the funding will now make it so that some of these more ambitious projects that we know we've been needing to do, whether it be in water infrastructure or transit or transportation, broadband, we'll actually be able to complete them. That we'll be able to combine these resources that we now have at the state level and that are going to come to help us at the federal level. From the federal level, we'll be able to finish these projects. And so I just think we're going to get a lot more online to help make our whole region more successful, stronger, more resilient. So that's one thing I would say. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about how we can use our resources to improve housing options, to fight homelessness, to make us, and also all of the kind of environmental infrastructure that we were talking about. But I do want to make sure that as we move forward with this new budget, the state budget, and the surplus that we do anticipate having, that we're going to continue to help resource, but also hold local governments accountable as they're fighting homelessness, making sure that we're providing really good supports to local government, but then holding them accountable to ensure that they're doing what they need to do to get people off the streets and into safer lodging.
Thank you, Senator Allen. And to you, Senator Murasucci, how do you foresee ways we can leverage both the state and federal government to really get a order of magnitude impact in the South Bay as well as LA County?
Yes, so when I look at the dollar amounts that are going to be coming from the federal infrastructure bill, I mean, I'm constantly reminded of how big the U.S. Our national action, on anything, whether it's against climate change or whether it's to close a digital divide by investing in broadband or all the other wonderful investing in our economy by investing in our roads and bridges. But again, I'm most excited about the big bold measures that are in this infrastructure bill to fight climate change. I had a chance to go to Glasgow, Scotland for this last United Nations Climate Change Conference, and the sense of urgency that nations coming together from around the world were emphasizing. Images of Pacific islands literally being underwater. If we don't start making serious reductions in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, now is a time. The climate crisis is here and now. Now is a time for us to go big and bold in investing in climate infrastructure. And that's why this infrastructure bill, along with so many of the other initiatives that you and President Biden are fighting for. I mean, just yesterday's news about the federal government going carbon neutral, net zero emissions by mid-century. That's the kind of global leadership that we need to save our planet. And this infrastructure bill, again, is a big part of that.
Hey, Ted, can I just throw in one extra thing? Obviously, I absolutely second everything that Al just mentioned. There is another threat out there that this bill is helping to address, and that has to do with cyber attacks. There's $40 million that will just be going to the state of California and institutions within California alone on the issue of cyber attacks. I know you've worked a lot in that space, Congressman, and I just want to point that out as well. This is an area that we have long needed to invest in. The cybersecurity concerns have only gotten worse. And I'm excited that there's going to be some additional resources to help make our local governments, our state government, a lot of our utilities and our institutions and our infrastructure more resilient to the threat of cyber attack.
As a recovering computer science major, I approve what you just said. Now, I also want to highlight for people who are watching how important it is to have state partners like Senator Allen and Al Murasucci, because some of this funding, actually a bunch of it, requires matching funds. So when the state is able to put up matching funds, right, it allows projects to go forward, to be completed, to even start. And that's why it's so important that not only California has a projected budget surplus, but that the state is willing to work with the federal government to execute these projects. Now we're going to do a poll question. It's the first time I've ever done this on a Facebook Live event. So I'm going to ask my staff member, Annie, to execute that poll question. And while we're getting the results, I'm going to be asking a pandemic question to both Senator Allen and Senator Murasucci. So Annie, if you want to go ahead with this poll question and tell people how to do it.
Sure. Hello, everybody. So you can answer the poll question right here on Facebook. And the question is, what kinds of investments are you most excited to see thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law? And the different choices are roads, bridges, and transit, green infrastructure, so expanded EV charging and clean energy programs, access to broadband, or good paying quality jobs. So you can answer the poll right here on the Facebook Live, and thanks for participating.
Thank you, Annie. And actually, before I ask a pandemic question, Annie's point about the jobs is something I had forgot to mention. Some of you may have seen the good news today that jobless claims have now fallen to the lowest since 1969. That's a 52-year low. The reason I know that is because I'm 52 years old. I was born in 1969, but it is amazing. And an article came out today calling this the Biden boom. And so we already are seeing tremendous growth in our economy. Since January 20th, approximately 5 million jobs have already been created. And now with this infrastructure law, even more jobs will be created. So now let me ask the pandemic question. Let me start with you, Senator Allen. I know you have been a longtime champion of vaccines. In fact, you authored legislation at the state level regarding vaccines. If you want to talk a little bit about that, but also about how important it is that people get vaccinated in order to mitigate this pandemic.
Yeah, no, thank you, Congressman. I mean, look, for me, I'm somebody who loved to travel. I'm also someone whose father had got polio when he was a kid. And so for me, from a very personal level, vaccines always, for me, gave me the freedom to be able to travel to various parts of the world without fear of contracting a dangerous communicable disease. And I think then growing up with my dad, who, as I say, was a victim of polio, continues to really struggle from that terrible, debilitating disease. I think people in his generation really couldn't believe that we were opening the door to the resurgence of dangerous communicable diseases in our society that we had effectively eradicated because there was a certain portion of the population that was subscribing to conspiracy theories about vaccine safety. There's no question that there is a very tiny portion of the population that shouldn't get vaccinated. But the vast majority of us ought to, and in fact, if anything, we need to get vaccinated to protect that small portion of the population. That's just in general. Now, of course, to talk about COVID, the vaccines have really, they are absolutely our best hope to get back to normal, to fully reopen our economy, get back to life as is. In fact, the only reason why we're starting to see the resurgence of various variants in other parts of the world is because not enough of their populations are vaccinated. The Omicron variant comes out of South Africa. It seems to have been combined with complications associated with HIV. And of course, they have a much lower vaccination rate there than we have here. One of the many things we have to do is make sure we get more vaccines out to the rest of the world. It's not just a question of charity and philanthropy. It actually helps us because we're living in a global economy. The less vaccinations there are out in other parts of the world, the more likely there will continue to be dangerous variants that will complicate our own vaccination efforts. Our own efforts to combat the pandemic. I just can't emphasize enough. I've gotten vaccinated. I've actually gotten my booster. If you are eligible, please go get vaccinated. This is really the only way we're going to be able to get back to normal. And I guess one of my kind of continual frustrations is that some of the very same folks who are most frustrated with the restrictions that we've had to impose so as to try to get the pandemic under control are sometimes some of the same folks that are making it more difficult for us to vaccinate the population. And so I ask our fellow constituents, please, get yourself vaccinated. If for whatever reason you shouldn't be vaccinated after a conversation with a doctor, please encourage everyone else to get vaccinated because we're going to need everyone else to be vaccinated to keep you safe. But for the vast majority of our population, it is absolutely the right thing to do. It's what we need to do together collectively to put this debilitating, exhausting, miserable pandemic behind us.
Thank you, Senator Allen. And to you, Senator Succi, as chair of the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change Policies, have you looked at, or are you going to be looking at how climate change may be contributing to making pandemics worse?
Yes, I mean, certainly, we have seen many of the theories, the research about how the transmission of the COVID-19 virus it may have been caused in part by the slow reduction of the natural habitats of animals like bats and increasing their interaction with and potential transmission jumping from animals to humans. And we know, again, when I went to the the climate change conference in Scotland, everyone is talking about the massive human migration that's going to be caused from climate change. I mean, the Pentagon, as you well know, Congressman, as an active duty Air Force officer, that the Pentagon has identified climate change as a national security threat. Where, I mean, people are talking. I know the right is always pointing to the so-called human caravan of migrants coming from Central America. The Pentagon is projecting that with climate change, those migrations, those quote unquote caravans, are going to get so much worse globally with the effects of climate change. So again, in order to not only save our planet, but to avoid all these human catastrophes, which includes COVID, as well as, unfortunately, the prospect of other potential pandemics in the future, we need to, that's why, I mean, climate change affects all aspects of our lives, and by investing, the billions of dollars that this infrastructure bill is calling to invest in the fight against climate change is only going to help in all of our lives by fighting many of these catastrophes, current or potential in the future.
Thank you. So I'm going to have my staff member Annie read the results of the poll, and then I will have Senator Allen and Senator Versucci give a brief close, and then I will close, and we will end the Facebook Live. Annie, if you want to read the results of the poll.
Yep. So again, the question was, what kinds of investments are you most excited to see thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law? The winner of the poll was green infrastructure, EV charging, and clean energy programs with 53% of the votes. In second place is roads, bridges, and transit with 28%. And then both broadband and good paying quality jobs had 9% of the vote. So thank you again for everybody who participated.
Thank you. And Senator Allen, if you want to close, and then followed by Senator Versucci.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. It's been fantastic partnering with you, Congressman, over the years, and with you as well, Senator Versucci. I mean, I think the South Bay and West Side communities are really well served by your leadership, Congressman. We really do appreciate you a great deal. It's been great to partner with you on this, and I really look forward to partnering very closely with your office as we talk about how to spend this money, how to make sure that it's really going to its highest and best use, how that we use it to make sure that this is all about improving quality of life while making us more resilient, while also doing our part in combating climate change and really improving what the experience of growing up and living and thriving in the Los Angeles region. That's what this is all about. Ultimately, we were so far behind in infrastructure investment. We were getting behind some of our competitor countries, and this is a big expenditure. A lot of people say they're nervous about the expenditure, but I will say, compared to some other major hits that our federal budget has taken the past few years, this is an expenditure that we know is going to pay off, because it's going to the broadband, how we improve the ways we get around, improving the ways we source our energy. These are the kinds of things that are going to make us so much stronger and more resilient, both environmentally, but also economically, in the many decades to come. So I think that people will look back at this bill, much like we look back at some of the New Deal programs that made such a difference in jump-starting our economy and leaving a lasting legacy for generations to come that we've all benefited from. I mean, I think about my high school, Santa Monica High School, where our beautiful theater, Barnum Hall, was built during the Works Progress administration. And I was able to benefit from that as a kid growing up in the 90s, in my hometown. That was the foresight of a previous generation, President Roosevelt and his partners in Congress. I think people will think similarly about President Biden and partners like you in Congress, many generations ahead of us, when they think about the kind of lasting legacy that this bill will help to construct. So It's an exciting thing. I think now our job is to make sure this money is well spent, that there's going to be accountability, that we're going to be really wise about these expenditures, that it's going to go to highest and best use, and that we're going to work together to make sure that the money is really going to improve quality of life for folks in our region. So thank you for your leadership, and I really look forward to partnering with both of you moving forward.
Same here. Thank you, Senator Allen, for your leadership as well. And Assemblymember Murasucci, if you want to close as well.
Yes, well, thank you again, Congressman Lieu, for inviting myself as well as my good friend, Senator Allen. It's always great to work with both of you, because I know that we have shared values especially to fight climate change and to save our planet. Just to follow up on what Senator Allen talked about, the historic nature of this infrastructure bill. We all remember FDR and the New Deal, and I'm hoping that this is just the beginning of the Green New Deal, where we are going big to invest in clean, renewable energy. We're going big to invest in climate infrastructure to save our planet before it's too late. And so, I'm so excited that our national leadership is in line with California's leadership to invest in our infrastructure, invest in jobs, and invest in saving our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murasucci, and look forward to working with you, and thank you for your leadership. I just want to close by saying that there's no doubt that things are better now than they were a year ago. Jobless claims are at a historic low. We have created millions and millions of jobs since January 20th. Kids are back in school. My wife, Betty, just completed her tenure as president of the Torrance School Board. They were the first large school district in Los Angeles County to reopen fully for all grades. We have vaccination shots going into more and more people's arms with every passing day. The economy is open. Wages are up. The stock market is up. Your 401k is doing better. So better days are going to come, even better than now. And I look forward to working with Senator Al Murasucci and all the folks in my congressional district, as well as folks in Congress, to make America and California and Los Angeles County an even better place to live, work, and play. Thank you so much for joining, and please stay safe out there. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.